Welcome to the Queer Love Podcast, the silly and serious shenanigans of two queer relationship coaches. I am your host, Elizabeth Cunningham.
And I'm your host, Lee Greeps.
On this podcast, we talk about how to live your best queer life with fulfilling, healthy relationships and anything else that makes your little queer heart happy. Because living your life outside of the heteronormative scripts is totally possible for you.
Each episode, we explore all things queer love from our professional perspective as relationship coaches, our own personal experiences, and as partners.
If you love our show, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships. You can also check out our website, www.queerloverelationships.com.
Thanks for following us and enjoy this episode.
Can we talk about that? Can we resolve this? Can we repair it? And if we can't, maybe we shouldn't be, as close anymore. And I always thought that was really bold. And I know that you're we also have a difference in how we operate in this way too. Welcome to the Queer Love Podcast.
Woo, 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 woo.
We did it.
Yeah. Did it without a coughing fit and everything.
I feel very proud of me. How's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? Every time I get on a call, especially a group call, that's a mixed bag answer. Well, I feel like a lot of what I've been hearing lately is that people feel okay in their own lives. They're these are all the things that are working well in my life. Not to say that there's things that aren't working well, but mainly people are just really concerned with the state of affairs, especially in our country and in the world. So, and I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a different crowd a lot where they're no, everything's on fire. So, but it's more in a mental health support space. So, obviously, they would come to that for a different reason than our group coaching.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think that that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about our topic today, which is
importance of queer friends and community. Right?
yes.
Excellent. I didn't know how I was supposed to phrase it, so I just went with it. We're going to talk about that stuff. And how to do it.
Those things and stuff.
Right?
Yeah, and the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. But I feel especially, on our group coaching calls, first of all, we have such a great little community. And because of the things that our clients have been able to accomplish, they do have a greater support system, outside of our calls as well. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about, queer friends, queer community, is because that is one of the main reasons why, our clients are doing really well, why I'm doing better than I, could be under these circumstances, for sure. So, and it's also something that, if you scroll around Instagram or TikTok for what could you be doing right now? One of the main things that people talk about is finding community, which I completely agree with as well. Not being alone, not being isolated, finding community. And there's so many different reasons for that, but mental health is certainly one of them, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I hear it's good things,
Well, tell me a reason why queer friends and community are important to you.
Yeah, well, queer friends, I'm like, that's what I want. It's just, I mean, because it's just shared experiences, really. And it's like, it's a automatic, like, safe space. In the sense of, like, it's not weird to talk about queerness here because we are queer. So, so it's just like, I mean, it's the importance of it's still it's the same thing as like the importance of having queer spaces in general, where it's like whether you're friends with the people or not, but you're just in the same space. For instance, right? It just feels very different. I mean, that's very clear, and it's very. I mean, it's also just difference in friends that like are queer or friends that are maybe not queer, and just like it's not to say obviously you can totally be friends with the heteros, and like there, it's just different, it's just a different experience where you're like maybe have to explain a lot more, or you're like you're never gonna get that because you can't because it's not your experience, so I think it's just more the ease that it brings in having queer friends, and yeah, it's just it really is such a different energy. So I mean, for me, it's just more of like the ease, the comfort, the connection that happens where you don't have to, go through all the different hoops and hurdles to like get to a space where people are like understanding more. I mean, it's the same as like the importance I see in if you are seeking support in some capacity, like to work with like a queer professional, right? Like not just the, whatever they say, like LGBTQIA friendly. It's like, what does that mean? You read a book about queer people or something, like it's, so it's just like the importance of where you're like, yeah, they're going to get it. Yeah. Because of their own lived experience. So it's just in that whole same vein for me is really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I definitely feel that in, because I used to mainly date men and now I don't. And so, like...
Me too.
Yeah. Hilarious. But when I started dating in like the queer space, and especially people who are, identify as women or AFAB, which again, for those people who don't know what AFAB is identify or assigned female at birth. There we go. And like it absolutely was this like felt sense of ease, understanding, like there's not a burden of, and I say burden lightly, but in some cases not lightly, but like most of all, like lightly, not like the burden of explanation for things, like even just things as simple as like having a menstrual cycle and not having any assumptions or negative comments or even just the fear of negative comments either. Is like or even like comments that the commenter does not feel are negative, but it's hard to not take as negative, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's a different vibe, it's a different feel, and I think it's been similar with, having queer friends versus more like hetero friends. And especially queer people who are, actually erase that, but like having queer friends versus having hetero friends. Yeah, it's just like, it's very similar where you don't have to explain as much. There is a lot more like shared experience and like common understanding of things. And it does feel easier to bring to talk about things and to bring things up. There's also, yeah, there's so much there in a shared experience of something that is like hard to characterize in words.
Yeah. No, I mean, it
Yeah.
is just, there's so many things that you just really, it's just there already in the space, you know? So, like, if, say, for instance, if you know, you're talking with your friends who, you know, also identify as queer about some sort of queer relationship related challenge or something like that, and it's like they're not, you know, it's, they're gonna get different aspects of it, right? Because it could be maybe something around like, oh yeah, they're, you know, they're maybe the partner is like more hesitant around like public spaces or something of that nature, of like, you know, affection or something like that. And so it's like, you know, someone who's like not in the queer way of life is just gonna be like, what? Well, you know, what? No, it's fine now. Everything's better, you know, or something like that. You know, not saying every hetero would say that, but you know, that seems to be a lot where it's, you know, there's just that lack of understanding because of the experience of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I keep having thoughts where I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna say that out loud. Never mind.
All right, what's a thought you want to say out loud?
Well, I guess, like, you know, what I'm curious, and I kind of want to talk about what people might find challenging about finding queer friends or like finding queer community. Because I know that that's not easy for everyone. And it's certainly not always easy for me either. Even though I feel like, you know, in talking to some people, I'm like, oh, I have an easier time than other people. And so, you know, but it's on a spectrum for everybody, right? Like the challenge of like finding people that you really resonate with, finding communities that you really resonate with. And also like, what do we mean by community too? That's also what's coming up for me. So like, I think what I mean by community is like something that's a lot more broad, like could mean a lot of things. Like your like I would consider my like extended friend group my community, you know, or a community, right? But I would also consider like certain online spaces a community, or like I think about when we went to Les Prom, you know, like I think about like going to different events like that, and I see that as community. I also see like, you know, more like advocacy things, like there's certain LGBTQIA plus like centers in Seattle, and you know I see those like organizations as community as well. Like our friends run the Resilient Hearts Animal Sanctuary, which is a queer owned and run organization, and like most of the volunteers are queer. It's like very, 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 very queer friendly space. And so even though it's more about like the animal sanctuary, I would consider that like a queer community. So like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of different I just wanted to make that more tangible because I feel like that word gets kind of like tossed around, you know, where it's just like, what does community mean? And I think that it can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can also, yeah, it can be very individualized, like the meaning to you, or like the different way. Also, just what community even feels like for you, too. So you know, because for some people maybe they're like, instead of just say for instance like a queer space where you don't necessarily know most of the people or anything of that, like where it's just more of like, oh, there's not like a intimacy of sorts, then it doesn't feel like community. Versus other people don't need that, so then it's like, no, this is a community, right? So,
Yeah.
So I think it, you know, to allow that individualized experience of what that means for you, what you seek, you know, what comprises up a community for you. Like that's really what it is. And like, yeah, what is indicating to you that you are part of a community, or that something is giving that sense of a community space or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's a really good question. Like, what are you seeking
Mm-hmm.
in community? I really like the word intimacy. Like, are you seeking, and intimacy as in like, for me, intimacy in this context would be like genuine connections
Yeah.
with people, like feeling like you belong, feeling like you're, the people who are in this community with you are friends that you could really talk about a lot of different things with,
Mm-hmm.
that you feel safe with, that you could be vulnerable with. Like that would be like intimacy and community for me.
Mm-hmm.
And is that like something that you need? Because like that's not something that I need in all community spaces
Mm-hmm.
for myself, right? Like I I also seek out some communities because of the more like anonymity of it, where it's just like there is a lot of people here and like I don't have to have intimate conversations with people. There isn't an expectation that I be friends with everyone. Like, again, I'm thinking of Les Prom, right? Like, there's no expectation in spaces like that to, like, meet everyone and
Mm-hmm.
talk and have conversations and connect and all of that. It's more like this is a space to have fun and dance and, whatever, have a good time. And if you meet, if you happen to meet someone who becomes a friend, fantastic. But that's not what this space is for, but it's still a community space. Like that's still a queer community space. Yeah. That's I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Oh, like I saw your face.
No, I'm just going, yeah, like that's a totally like very valid view of all of that. Like, I mean, I think it's just again, it just is different for each person. Because I mean, for me, yeah, community for me is like there needs to be connection, like the meaningful connection, genuine connection,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like for something to feel like a community for me, because like community, I think of like it is like a my hands are going like this together, like it's like a holding of a space, like where there is a group of people that are interwoven in some capacity of like and interwoven in a way of where it's like no, like we look out for each other, and we're there for each other kind of thing, versus yeah, if I'm in a like we're just gonna keep talking about Les Prom apparently, but I mean just to follow that example so that
Right.
like you can see a
It's
different
such a tangible example.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
can see a different perspective on it really, and so it's
Yeah.
like in that setting I'm just like it's just a group of queers. Love it. Which if you look at a scientific lens, that is a community. Like but like for me in the sense of what we're talking about here, like that's not a community for me. It doesn't have that feeling. But I'm like, I love being around all these queer people that, yeah, I'm not, we're not all friends. That's okay. But I love that we're all here together.
Yeah.
That's great. But it's not giving me the vibe of community, right? And so it's because like for me, community doesn't need to be like an extensive amount of people. I think that's also what people will think too, of like community needs to be a large group of folks.
Like 50 plus.
Right. And you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, because it gets thrown around like an online community where there's like, 150 people in this forum or whatever it is.
Or thousands.
Yeah. And I'm like,
just
that is the opposite of community for me in my definition. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, like community for me could be me and 2 people, me and 3 other people or whatever, like a very small thing where I'm like, yeah, but the community is again with my hands, it's like it's the holding of this space for multiple people where there is that intimacy of understanding, of connection, of just that creative space that comes because like for me community requires safety for sure, and that sense of fitting in, like belonging, yes, but like fitting in together, and so like that's where it were that requirement of the, understanding meaningful connection with one another, where it's like, yeah, we are woven in together in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because for me, that's like a friend group. Like,
yeah, no, I know that. Like for you,
Yeah.
like it's very different. No, I mean, like that's why I'm like, see, like, but you can see the different perspectives on what it's like. Oh, we're talking about community. It's like, what are we actually talking about?
Right.
Because everyone has these different
perspectives
on it. Like it's like someone's like, that's a friend group, and it's like me, I'd be like, that's a community, right?
Yeah.
And so it's.
And I think it can be both. Like, I don't think that it's, like, mutually exclusive.
No, it's just, like, the language that you're using,
right.
too.
Yeah, and because for me as well, community, like, I don't think in quite frankly, like, a lot of circumstances, you don't have to like or be friends with everyone in your community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the like let's go with like a LGBTQ like organization, where it's like that for me. Like I'm thinking of there's an organization on Capitol Hill that has like a space where they run classes about like relationships, safe sex, health. It's all around like LGBTQIA plus, all of this stuff. And for me, that organization symbolizes like a community, like people who are involved in that are in community with one another. And I'm sure that not all of them like each other, especially not all the time. Well, I mean, and even with friends, you don't have to like each other all the time. But there's not an expected intimacy all the time with that. It's more around like a common goal. Like this community is here for a specific purpose. We're serving our community. In this case, it's queer people serving queer people. We're serving our community in this way. We're hosting these classes. We provide these services, and so like for me that's a community, and like you don't
totally understand that perspective.
Yeah, and you don't have to like each other.
I'm like, that's just a large group of people. Like that's what in my mind. Like I'm like, it's a group of people. Yeah, but again, like I mean, you can capture it as a community, which again, in a scientific way, that is what. But like when but I'm saying like if I'm seeking community.
Right.
For me, what I am going to be seeking, like if I'm going to call it a community, is then what I just shared a few minutes ago.
That's funny.
Versus like, yeah, it's a group of people that are they're working towards a common goal, but I'm like, it's a group of people doing that, because it doesn't meet the like what I have outlined already around for myself of what is community, for me, my felt sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that both are important though. Like, and I also think that you can be a part of both. In my opinion, you can be a part of both and have a sense of belonging, right? Because it's also, that goes into a whole nother thing about what has you feel like you belong, where I feel like some people have to have what you described, which is something a lot more like intimate and safe and like really being known and like a space to be vulnerable and things like that, where like I can feel like I belong in a space that not everybody knows me, but it's like, but I feel like I belong here because we have a common purpose, because we have a common goal, because we have this shared belief or value system or something like that. Like I can feel like I can belong in spaces like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's, I mean, because that's the different, like the distinction for me of belonging or versus fitting in. Like belonging, I'm like, I belong everywhere, right? In the sense of like, we all belong everywhere, right? Like we belong, but to fit in is a different thing. And so, yeah, but I mean, even in your example of, yeah, if we're working towards we're in this group organization and we're working towards this common goal. It's like, yeah, we belong here for sure, but maybe you don't necessarily fit in with the crew of people in the way that like, where you're like, oh yeah, like solid, but you're like, yeah, I belong here. And also like, yeah, I'm absolutely bringing value because look at my background. Like I'm going to help with all this. So it's like that kind of different experience too.
Mm. I feel like we're hitting on a lot of different points where we just have different like felt senses of different like words and like, but it's also like really important to like be like, okay, yeah, like what do you mean by that? What do you mean by community? What do you mean by friends? What do you mean by belonging? What do you mean by fitting in? Like what is your you dear listener, what is your specific felt sense of that or criteria for that? Because, and this is something that we talk about in our coaching as well, because if you are able to articulate what it is you mean by something, then you're actually more likely to get that thing or to experience that thing, because then people know what you're talking about. Otherwise, like if I told, Lee, I'm like, oh, I'm really looking for community, then their idea of what I'm looking for and how they can help me cultivate that is going to be completely different than like what I actually mean when I say I am looking for community.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, I know like, my different perspective and all that. So yeah, when people tell me like, I want to build community or I want to find community, whatever it is, I'm always just like, what does that mean? Like, what does that actually mean? What would indicate to you that you have found community?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, or what is required to build community for you?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, if you're like, oh, to find a community, I just need to be in, it's a larger group setting where we all share an interest of our love of video games. And I'm like, well, we can easily find that, like one little Google search and we are there.
We're there. We're right there.
Right? But versus being like, oh, I want to find community where we meet up weekly and we focus on this stuff and the feeling of it is this. And I really want to feel like a bond and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, well, that's going to take a little bit more time. But, but we can do that still. But now we know what we're cooking up,
working towards, cultivating. Yeah.
So yeah,
as I'm talking about this too, I'm and we don't have to go into this, but another term for that could overlap with some of the things that I've been talking about is coalition building versus community building as well, because I think that some of the things that I have said, some people might say that that's more inside of coalition building instead of community building.
Yeah. Which again, this is why we talk about what we're talking about.
This is why this is meta conversations.
Yeah, because you don't know what that is, and I mean, I think also even something that I've seen a lot with queer folks and clients and friends around just the term community can have a lot of charge just because of past hurt, because it can be associated with, let's say, family, or the community that you grew up in, like the neighborhood or the city, the town, whatever it is. The church community, right? And so it is then associated with something that was very hurtful or painful, very, outcasting towards you. And so, also just taking that into consideration for yourself too, of what is your relationship to even just any idea of community really, but, what is that for you? What has been your history with community, and just being able to take that into account, because that's definitely stuff that I've seen folks, struggle with, and understandably so, because of how you have been treated by quote unquote community, right?
Right.
So just also having that in mind too.
Yeah, and I definitely have had to go, have had to do some healing work around that as well. And anybody who's been following my content for a couple of years, like I talked about that. Summer 2023 is when I talked about that because I did an event called Building Community in Polyamory. And I had to confront a lot of my own past hurt from community things in putting on that event too. I was like, oh my God, like I feel not like a fraud feels like a little bit too harsh.
Like imposter?
Imposter, yeah, just or inauthentic. I think inauthentic is probably a better word. Because like it wasn't like, oh, I'm not qualified to do this. It was more just like I have a lot of, hurt here. And so it feels inauthentic to be talking about how great community is when I'm like, fuck community right now.
There you go.
I'm like, no, I don't want to join your community. Absolutely not. That sounds terrible. I like my little friend group. But if I would have had your definition of community, I would have felt a little bit better about
These are the differences. It's so fun. I'm like, I literally am thinking about it. I mean, because we mentioned church, church community. Because like, I grew up, going to Catholic church, which, again, I had a very different experience because I was always like, what? I'm questioning everything. But I say that because just even reflecting on my use of language around things in church, like where it's like, the church community and all that, where there was like, I always called it like church group because it's like, it's not a community for me versus, but then like when I did confirmation, when I was a teenager and you got, put into your little pods, your little groups, which I got like, and it was 4 or 5 of us. So 4 or 5 teenagers plus a little like mentor leader, which I had amazing mentor leaders. Like they were such solid humans. And so like I had a really great experience with that, but I would consider that my church community in that little pod, right? But we were all really close. Like we didn't know each other and then we became really good friends and we always looked out for each other. And like, we just talked about things that were not church, like our mentor was like, what's going on, guys? Like, let's talk about life, which makes for a great mentor. And so, but that like, I loved going to my confirmation classes for that reason. If it didn't feel that way, it would have been a completely different experience, of course.
Right.
But it's like, that was my church community for the 2 years of confirmation. And so like that really supported me in that way, right? Versus if it didn't feel that way, I would have been like, it's my little church group that I have to go to. But it met the requirements for me of community, right? And so, like it is just like how I have looked at things. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I have always done that.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, because I don't know. I'm just kind of reflecting on that right now. Just like, how did I get my definition of community? How did I get my, felt sense of community, right? And not that we need to like delve into that necessarily right now, but
it's just it's interesting.
Yeah. No, it is. It's super interesting. Like fun to or not fun, but yes, interesting is a better word. Interesting could be fun. Interesting to think about, for sure.
Man.
Yeah. Huh. Cool. Very cool. Well, I'm curious for those of you listening to this, what your definition of community is. Do you know your definition of community or what your
what are elements of
what are elements of that
is?
Yeah.
What are elements of what not community is.
And I also, you know what? Like, you could also do that with friends too. Like, what's your definition of a friend? What makes a friendship? I'm thinking about the book.
Solid
Yeah.
question.
So there's this book that it is not necessarily relevant to what we're talking about right now, but there's a really good example in the book. Excuse me. But the book is called We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers, which, if you want to read a book written by a Black woman about how building wealth or making money impacts marginalized people, that's a really, really good book. Plug. Okay. And there is a chapter about like, yeah, like what are the that's more about like your community and your friends and like who are the people that you are surrounding yourself by, and how are you, and how
interacting with them.
Yeah, how are you interacting with them? What do you expect in your relationships? Are you being intentional about your relationships? How do the people in your life make you feel? Because that is going to really impact how you feel, and then what you feel is possible for yourself, right? And so one of the stories that she shared was about a woman that she had worked with who had a criteria for the people that she allowed to be close to her. She was like, you need to meet this criteria in order to like continue to be in like my inner circle, basically. And she would reassess all of her people every single year, and not like she wouldn't like sit them down and have like a conference meeting with them or something like that. Yeah, end of year friend evaluation or something. But it was a way for her to check in with herself to see if, number one, she needed to have a conversation with people, someone in her life, being like, yeah, actually, like, since this happened, hanging out with you has been actually really stressful. Like, can we talk about that? Can we resolve this? Can we repair it? And if we can't, maybe we shouldn't be, as close anymore. And I always thought that was like really bold. And I know that you're like, we also have a difference in how we operate in this way too. But like really being bold, and for me that's being bold, and being like, yeah, like you do have to meet a certain standard in our relationship in order to stay in my life or maintain this type of proximity to me. And yeah, for me that's like I'm getting nervous just talking about like someone else doing that, I'm like, oh my God. Meanwhile, Lee's like, nope, like, let them go. It's fine. Let them go. They can live their life in other places and other ways and without me.
100%. But that's always how I've been, so like it's been very clear to me in those ways, because I think that's also there. I wonder if that's like a difference between, in terms of like our perspectives on that.
Yeah.
Is because you are very much like, you cast a wide net,
I do.
for connections, and, whether it's friendships or not.
I've always been that person.
Right,
I've always been the
that
person who's like, I know everyone. I connect with everyone. I do all the things, like,
right. So that's very different than me, who I've always been like, ever since a wee little one, where I went to preschool and started making my friends, I was like, I just want a couple friends. Like, I had no other problem. Like, I mean, I always got along with people. Like, I was always liked all the things, cool. But I was like, no, my couple of friends. And then, like, going into grade school, and it was like, maybe I got a couple more friends, but it was always my close circle. Like, I'm like, my little community. I'm just like, because I want that potency, the depth of it. And again, the other kids that I think, people would be like, oh, they're your friends or whatever. I'm like, they're not my friend. Like, we get along. We'll maybe play on the playground sometimes, but they're not my friend. Like, we don't hang out. I don't know a lot about them. Like, they don't know things about me because it just, like, we're not, like, that doesn't work. Friendship doesn't work for us. You know, playing basketball, that works for us. That's cool, right? And so it's allowing the, you know, and I think that, you know, for me too with friendship is because of that. Like, you know, that's why I have, you know, some friends still that are like since grade school, right? Because it's like we just kept going and able to evolve with each other, because I think that's, you know, that example that you shared from the book, it's important because it's, you are allowing the evolution for yourself and the evolution for these other people, right? Like, there's nothing wrong where it's like, oh, we just don't align anymore, right? It's just like, oh, we don't align anymore, and there we are. Like, off you go onto your path, and off I go onto my path. And like, so great that we had this friendship for, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 5 months, 10 months, right? Whatever it is. You know, but it's just like understanding the value of that. And, you know, because it's like, I can, all the people that we were friends at a point in time. And then it just, you know, for whatever reason, life took us in other paths. But I like look on them very fondly, and like I respect them, but I wouldn't call them my friend anymore. I'd be like, oh, that's just an awesome human that, yes, I once was friends with, and they're crushing it at life, hopefully, right? And I know that like if we interacted again, like it'd be fine, you know, like, and maybe we could reestablish a friendship if that worked. But I don't call them my friends anymore.
That's so interesting. I'm just like,
I know, well, we have very different things, you know. And I think also, I mean, like, you know, in the age of social media, and like the age of, I mean, you think about like MySpace and like Facebook, you know, the things of like my friends. And so like it kind of has distorted like friends too, I think, for a lot of people, like where it's like, I have all these followers or I have all these friends, they're my friends, and I'm like, are they your friends? Like, you know, but again, that's going off of what does it mean to be a friend for you, right? Like, what does friendship mean for you? And then, because like some people are like, oh yeah, no, like if we get along, they're my friend. Yeah. And it's like, okay, then that's your friend. Like, but versus for me, I'm like, we can get along, you're not my friend, you know, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I think that's the difference with me. I mean, with different things around that. But like, I see friend as being a very like, it's like friend is the same as like partner. It's like there's these sacred little experiences where I'm like, no, like it's important that it's, you know, there's a potency to that. So, you know, I try to like really, you know, be mindful of that and being like, or it's like, oh yeah, like maybe there's a work colleague, but maybe they're actually my friend too. So I'm like, oh no, they're my friend, right? And so there's a difference. I also use homie interchangeably with friend. So I'm like, oh, it's my homie.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like, for me, and I know that, you know, my dad was very similar to this as well. It's like, no, people are just your friends. You know, you're either, like, I don't even know how to explain that. Like, you're just friends with people. Like, you just are. Until you're not. Like, but, like, for me, like, if we're not friends, like, we are not friends.
And then there's that.
And then there's that, right? Which, like, for me, like, having someone who you like, but then you say you're not friends with because of my lens of friends makes me feel really bad. Because I'm just like, oh, something's wrong, you know. And I know I heard you. I totally got it.
No,
like,
I mean,
nothing's
I think
wrong.
This is totally valid.
Yeah,
like,
but that's what comes up for me. You know, like if you're like, oh, that person's not my friend, like that for me is like a something's wrong. Like something happened, something's wrong, this person's a bad person, something like that. Like that's what comes up for me. And
it's just so funny if you're like, oh, they're not my friend. I'd be like, oh, okay. Like that's why I'd be like, oh yeah, they're not your friend for sure. Like cool.
But I've you know what? It's funny because I've talked to people about this before, about like what's the word for someone who is not your friend, but you still, like root for, cheer for, totally here for, like wishing them all the success,
like they're a cool human that I know.
Yeah. Like,
or like an acquaintance or whatever.
That's the best word that I've come up with, and or people that I have had conversations about this with. We've just come up with like acquaintance or like friendly acquaintance or something like that.
Yeah, I think acquaintance. Or I'm always just like, oh yeah, no, they're a cool human that I know from this event, or whatever. Like, they're really cool. Like, I don't know a lot about them. Like, we're not friends, but they seem really cool.
Yeah. Because, like, if you tell me, like, oh, we were friends, like, that, in my brain, I'm like, drama.
And that is not the case. No.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
No, I mean, because I know for you, if you're like, we are not friends, I'm like, okay, there was something there with that person. Versus where I'm like, say I'm talking about something from, let's say, college, where I'm like, oh yeah, the friends I had in college, then.
But that's usually what you say, right?
Yeah, like that's why I'm like, yeah, the friends I had in college, whatever, like that. Yeah, we're not friends anymore. But like, because life just took us in different paths and we didn't stay connected in the way that I would want to.
Right.
Being friends, right? And so it's like, there was absolutely nothing wrong. There was no drama. They would be totally chill. If I came across them, they would be like, oh my God, what's up? And I'd be like, oh,
if they recognized you.
Yeah, I mean,
we were talking about that the other day.
Yeah. Now. But yeah, like if there was that moment where it's like, oh my God, what's up? It's just like, oh, cool. We're all good. Like there's no drama or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I definitely have past friendships like in high school that ended that I was like, I don't know what is actually happening here, but apparently something's wrong, but you're not telling me, so I don't know what's wrong. But even then, I'm just like, well, they were my friends, and that sucked at the end.
Yeah.
Although one of them, we made up, and like we're not friends now, but like it was just like, yeah, that was some teenage stuff, and I'm like, oh, well, now I know different things about it, but like, we had lunch when I was in college, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. Now we're good.
That's so funny. Because, like, I love that we're having this conversation because, number one, for me, like, honestly, like, this is taking a lot of charge for me out of, like, some of, how do I want to say that? Like, this is just taking some charge for me around some of this. And, maybe it's like just trying this on because it's random thought. But stick with my silliness here. But what if they're like dormant friends?
That is dormant, inactive friends.
Like, because I'm thinking. Because I'm just like, if someone from high school, for example, looked me up in Seattle and was like, hey, I'm going to be in Seattle. I'd love to, like, run into you. I'd be like, well, depending on who they are. If they're not a dormant friend.
They're not a friend.
Then if they're not
then we know.
Then we know. If they're like a dormant friend, because like I had a friend actually from high school look me up a couple months ago because he wanted to send a referral to me because he's been like following, my relationship coaching stuff online. And he reached out. He was like, hey, do you remember me from high school? Like, I've known him since, actually elementary school. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Of course I remember you. How are you? Like, all this stuff. But, like, if he was, if we, like, struck up a friendship again, But again, it's like, it's a dormant friend, because I never thought of him as like not a friend. Like, even though we haven't spoken to each other since we were
Yeah.
18 years old, I would still think of him in my mind as a friend. I would still be like, oh yeah, he's a friend. Because he's not a friend. You know, like, and there's nothing, like, we didn't have a falling out or anything. And if he called me back up and was like, hey, like, let's go get coffee, I'd be like, yeah, for sure. Like, so, like, he's still a friend. Even though we haven't spoken since we were 18, he's still a friend.
There you go. I'd be like, oh, it's a friend that I had in high school. Wanted to meet up.
Yeah. I mean, I would say friend from high school to give it context, but in my mind, it would be...
No, in my mind, we're not friends.
Yeah, that's
I'd be
wild.
like, oh, the friend I had in high school. Oh, that'd be really interesting to catch up with them, you know? Like, just to hear... That'd be weird to talk to them. I'm very curious. Let's talk.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Lee's here for the social experiments.
Yeah. I mean, I think... Oh, my God. Always. But, I mean, I think you know, I wonder too the aspect of like how we often get socialized too with like, oh, you want to have all these friends, like make friends with everyone, like be their friend, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I think because it goes into things too, like it's like, oh, unless like I'm not liked unless they're my friends, right? Like I'm not desirable unless I have friends, right? Like, you know, there's all those kinds of, it's like the same
liked
thing
or valued or
yeah, like it's like, oh, well, they don't like me, you know, because they're not my friend or whatever it is, where I'm like, that's not true, you know, like I like people, but they're not my friend, you know, and I mean, I think that's also the thing that made it different for me in school, where I was like, I could care less if they get upset about me not calling them their friend because they're just like, well, we were around. I'm like, but we're not friends, you know, or they're like, don't you want to be friends with so-and-so? They're so popular, or like, don't you want to be friends with them? I'm like, no. They don't seem like a good friend for me, and also to you, but for me. But I just never, I mean, I never had that issue. Luckily, I didn't have that issue. I had other issues, but I didn't have the issue
Don't worry, I had other issues.
Yeah, just go back to the CPTSD episode. But, you know, I didn't have the challenge around worrying about if people liked me or not. Because I was just like, I mean, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
And if you like me, that doesn't mean we're going to be friends still, you know? So it just, it didn't rile me up, I suppose. So it just, I think that's what has made it so simple for me in that way.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so interesting.
I'm like, yeah.
Huh. Well, bringing it back to queer friends.
I'm talking about friendship. So again, what do you mean by friends?
Well, I mean, but it would be this, you know, same.
No, I mean, but that's the same. Like, it's like, what do you mean by friends? When you say, I want to go with queer friends, it's like, but what does friendship mean?
Yeah, what does friendship mean?
What does that entail?
What do you want out of that relationship? You know, what would be, if someone was your friend, what expectations would you have of them?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a really big one, too. Because, like, I think that has been, for me in friendship, something that has been difficult. Just like a difference of expectations and what that friendship means, right? And having those conversations more explicitly, I think would have either, you know, saved those relationships or saved drama in those relationships. Just being like, oh, we're friends, so you expect me to, you know, text you regularly, and by regularly you mean every single day. Okay, well then that's not what I signed up for. Like, I'm not that friend. And all of my friends who are still my friends know that I am not that friend. I am not the text you every day person. I am the pick up when you call me person. I am the, if you need me, I will be there person, but I am not the text you every day person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. This has been a really cool conversation for me. I hope everybody's having a good time, but for me, this has been great.
That's what we strive for. Bless you.
Oh, excuse me. Ooh. All right. Anything else that you want to say about queer friends and queer community?
Nah, get clear on what that is for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, get an understanding. It just makes it simpler.
Ooh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Oh my gosh. Jeez Louise.
Makes it simpler. And I think even on just like that, the last note that you talked about with like friends and expectations and stuff too. I think, you know, what you're open to for friendship, because it's like, you know, it can look very different for me to still feel like we're friends, and it's going to be different in different friend interactions. Like, you know, I have like some friends where I'm like, yeah, I text them a lot or I talk to them a lot, or I have friends where it's like every once in a blue moon, but we're still like, it's again that sense of we know each other, we're there for each other, we could always reach out and they are right there, you know, like that kind of feeling. And you know, it looks different how it shows up. And so you know, even getting clear on those kinds of things too, of what you could create with someone, and if that works, it's like a partnership, right? Like just make it your own. So just thinking of different ways to do that as well.
Beautiful. All right, well, we love you. We think you're great.
Go make friends.
We hope you win.
Go make friends. Love you.
Love you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Queer Love Podcast. We would love to hear from you. Drop us a line on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at Queer Love Relationships, or email us at queerloverelationships@gmail.com. If you are interested in working with us, follow the Linktree link in the show notes. See if our offers resonate with you, and if they do, sign up with us or book a discovery session. We are so grateful that you're here, listening, learning, and growing with us. Until next time, keep loving.